Welcome to Break the Cycle with Bethany Dotson, the podcast for high achieving professional women who struggle with codependency, attracting emotionally unavailable partners, and who repeat dysfunctional patterns in love. I'm your host, Bethany Dotson, and if you want to learn more about how to break your cycle in love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and be the first to know when a new episode drops. I'll see you inside. I'm going to talk about why you can be hyper independent and you're driven and you're goal oriented and you're achievement oriented when you're single and you seem to really have it going on, right? You have your ish together when you're single, but then when you get into your romantic relationship, something happens and you wind up feeling like you can't quit this person. You get lose yourself, you get sucked into this person's problems. And so I want to talk about why you can be hyper independent in regular life and have a lot of goals and really have your shit together, and then be codependent in relationships. Somebody in my coaching group brought this up. She said, I read an article about codependency and emotional abuse. And I was shocked to realize that I kind of fit the bill for being codependent, but I've never thought of myself as being codependent. I don't really need a relationship. I'm very driven in my regular life. I'm really driven in my work. And I want to talk about this because I believe it's a pretty common theme. So, the number one reason why you're hyper independent and probably a high achiever, maybe even an overachiever in your life, really good at what you do at work, really good at being a super mom to your kids, and yet you are a codependent mess and lose yourself in unhealthy relationships that don't start off feeling that way necessarily, is fear. Fear. And specifically, the subconscious fear of not being good enough. Now, nobody wakes up in the morning and brushes their teeth or makes their coffee or drives to work and looks at themselves in their rearview mirror and says, you know what? I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Maybe if you're really, really depressed and you've just gone through a really horrific breakup or divorce, you might more consciously feel that way. But most people don't consciously feel this way. Instead, because this is a subconscious belief, and this subconscious belief of not being good enough, of being unworthy, of being unlovable, often gets implanted early in life. So maybe you had a perfect childhood, right? Maybe you went on vacation. Maybe your parents stayed married. Maybe everything, you went to school on time, like all these things lined up in your childhood. You can still take on these beliefs if you have just one bad relationship, right? Maybe you get into a relationship with an emotionally unavailable person. You married young, you didn't really know any better. You didn't know what to compare that person to, you didn't have a benchmark. That can create the subconscious belief system of I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I don't deserve. So, how this usually shows up in life, a fear based subconscious belief system of not being lovable, is number one, being an overachiever or being a high achiever and being hyper independent and feeling like you need to achieve, do in order to feel worthy. So, your ability to feel worthy and like you deserve and like you matter and like you belong is actually based on how much you can do. And I see this a lot in the women that I work with. They're often really smart. They are driven. They work really hard in their career. A lot of them have upper level titles in their career. But deep down inside, there's something that's not quite clicking, and it causes them to get into these unhealthy relationships where they're never getting their needs met. And it's because usually of a subconscious belief that they are either unworthy, that somehow they're unlovable, or that somehow they're not good enough. It could also mean, variation of that is like something's wrong with me. I keep doing all the right things, but nothing ever feels like enough. I keep achieving, I keep hitting the benchmark at work, I keep hitting the benchmark in my education, and I still don't feel like I'm enough. It becomes like this bottomless pit. And a big indicator of somebody who's had emotional neglect, even emotional abuse in their childhood from a parent or a caregiver, somebody who has maybe had a narcissistic parent or a parent who had narcissistic tendencies, the number one trait of that is that person grows up to be an overachiever because they learned early on that who they were, or they took on the meaning early on in life that who they were or what they were doing wasn't enough. And instead of wanting to fall into that belief, they wind up working harder than they need to in reality to try and feel enough. They may be the sounding board to all of their friends or their coworkers or a family member or family members that have a lot of things going on with them in their life. They might be, kind of the sounding boards to a lot of drama or chaos in their life because they're kind of a caretaker. They take on this caretaking role because maybe in childhood or early adult life, they caretook a lot with a parent or a caregiver. So it all goes back if you find yourself hyper independent, meaning you're driven, you're goal oriented, you're not laying awake at night thinking when you're single that you really, really need a man. And the toxic patterns don't really show up until you're in a romantic relationship. It's almost always because of fear and prior emotional trauma that you haven't fully yet let go of or dealt with yet, and belief systems that are implanted in your subconscious from an earlier time in your life. And those beliefs, once again, are I'm unlovable. Something's wrong with me. I'm a little different. I feel like I talk to a lot of women who feel like they're kind of an outsider. They're loners. They look at other people in their sphere, their social circle at work who have relationships and the white picket fence, or so they think. And they tend to create a meaning like these people have it easier for me. I was once working with somebody who bent over backwards at her job and was constantly working, working, working. She was really, really good at what she did, but she had the sense that everybody else around her, her coworkers, had it a lot easier than she did. They seemed to get the help that they needed faster. They seemed to get promoted quicker than she did. And she was always the one looking from the outside in, feeling like something was wrong with her. And the irony is that if you subconsciously believe that something is wrong with you, or if you subconsciously believe that you're unworthy, you are going to recreate scenarios in your life that prove those beliefs to be true. For example, the client that I was speaking about who always felt like people had it easier than her at work constantly kind of found herself in these like impossible scenarios or these impossible work predicaments that it was like hard to find a solution. She was kind of on her own. And this was kind of a recurring theme. And it showed up in her relationships where she wasn't getting her needs met in romantic relationships. And spent a lot of time looking at her ex and how he was treating the new person. And all of this kept proving her subconscious belief of something's wrong with me. Why do they have it easier? True. So I say this to my clients a lot. Your beliefs are going to influence what you get in life. So your beliefs are going to cause you to think certain things and make certain choices in your life, like ignoring red flags, like people pleasing, like believing in somebody's potential more than you believe in your own, like abandoning yourself. And until you address the trauma that's the emotional trauma that's caused those belief systems and the belief systems themselves, you're going to keep co creating the pattern in your life. And a lot of people spend a lot of time in talk therapy. They spend a lot of time online researching and they get some ahas, they gain some knowledge. But because these subconscious beliefs and this emotional trauma is so deeply buried, most of the time, you're not even aware that it's happening when it's happening. And talk therapy and researching tends to be, kind of like at a 10 or 20% surface level. Whereas when you're trying to overhaul belief systems and you're trying to overhaul a pattern that you've had and you keep repeating it, like no matter how hard you work on yourself, you have to get deeper under the hood and under the surface. I'll talk about that more later on what it takes to heal this pattern. But the number one reason, just to quickly recap, why you are hyper independent and probably a high achiever, an overachiever, you're really driven when you're single and you're on your own in your own life. And you also seem to get into codependent relationships with emotionally unavailable or narcissistic people is because of fear. And the root cause of that fear is subconscious. So, with subconscious meaning like 90% of the time, you're not even fully aware that it's happening. So, subconscious fear of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, something's wrong with me, I'm unlovable. And again, very rarely do people wake up in the morning and look at themselves in the mirror and declare and stare at themselves and go, you know what? I'm unlovable. No, what often happens is that they wind up being a workaholic. They wind up working too hard, often in jobs or situations that are draining them, just like they get into draining relationships and work too hard to keep that going. But they may even tell themselves, I deserve a great partner. Their words are saying that, but if you look at the last 20 or 30 years of their life, none of that history matches up to that. They say, I'm worthy of a great partner. I know I deserve better, but subconsciously, there's a different story going on. And that's ultimately what you have to shift if you want to break this pattern. So, number one reason, fear and subconscious belief systems. A second reason, why you're hyper independent and an overachiever over here in your life. And then you get into an addictive codependent cycle in your relationships, your romantic relationships, is due to a fear of emotional intimacy. Dr. Laura Berman, a relationship coach, she's a psychotherapist, she talks a lot about intimate relationship patterns, says that emotional intimacy, and her word is into me see, meaning intimacy is really allowing somebody to see all of you all the way in, letting them all the way in. And a lot of people who are hyper independent and then codependent have a fundamental fear of emotional intimacy because on some level, they're afraid that if they allow somebody all the way in, that runs a higher risk of rejection or abandonment. And that's ultimately what she's really afraid of. So, a lot of times, the clients that I work with have some kind of rejection or abandonment, emotional trauma in their past. Maybe it was a parent who was the parent was physically there, but the parent was emotionally unavailable. Maybe it was a parent who was an alcoholic. Maybe it was a parent that just got up and left one day and never came back. And, they've tried their best to get past that. Now they're 40 or 50. And guess what? They still keep attracting partners who can't give them what they need. And they still keep feeling like something's wrong with them. And it's my belief that when you keep attracting people that cause you all of this pain, it's really a call for you to heal your own wounding. The reason we keep recreating patterns in our relationship cycles is so that those feelings can come up because they need to come up. That stuff needs to come up so that you can properly deal with it. But unfortunately, most people don't properly deal with it. Instead, they anchor more firmly into the belief of something's wrong with me. I can't trust anybody now. I can't trust myself. I can't trust other people. And they put a 10-foot steel wall in front of their heart. And that's actually the opposite of what needs to happen. What really needs to happen is learning to soften those walls and allow yourself to process those traumatic feelings, that repressed emotion, get that out of your system because most people that I work with try to avoid their feelings. They avoid their feelings by being a workaholic, staying chronically busy. Hyper independence is another one, a chronic trauma response. People who are hyper independent have been hurt somewhere in the past, so much so that they just become hyper independent. And it's not like they're waking up every morning and saying, I'm going to take care of everything myself. It's a subconscious feeling, it's a subconscious belief. It's a wounding that she's not even fully aware of. But again, the way that this shows up is that you never allow help. You have a hard time asking for help. You're probably people pleasing and taking care of everybody else. And that fear of abandonment or rejection is really a fear of allowing somebody all the way in because somewhere in your psychology, you're terrified that if that happens, that person might leave you and you might feel even more abandoned and rejected. But I want to really point out that all of this is rooted why you're hyper independent and then codependent relationships all comes down to one thing, and that is fear. And you cannot have a healthy co created relationship when you are living in fear and when you have a subconscious belief system that is rooted in fear, and when you are making fear based choices in your life, like ignoring red flags, staying single for 10 years, only going on one date with somebody and then immediately cutting it off because no, 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 this doesn't feel good. I talk to a lot of people who can't get past, they've had 20 or 30 years of bad relationships and they can't get past the first date without finding something wrong with that person and picking that person apart. And yes, there are absolutely you go on first dates with people, you don't feel any chemistry. But when it happens 2 or 3 years and you've never been able to make it past a first date, that's usually a sign that there's some kind of underlying trauma that's blocking you from allowing yourself to receive emotional intimacy. And most people who attract emotionally unavailable partners are emotionally unavailable themselves. They don't want to feel their feelings. They avoid their feelings. They make justifications. When people ignore red flags, they make a lot of justifications around their partner's behavior. They take responsibility for that. Well, maybe I'm overreacting. They minimize and make a lot of excuses to stay in that scenario. And that's a trap because the longer you do that, the more pain you incur. And the more pain you incur, the more stories you make about yourself that see something's wrong with me. I'm unlovable. And people will get 50 or 60 or 70 years into their life with this patterning. And it's challenging to break. Is it possible? Yes, but you have to be fully committed to that process. So just to quickly recap, the number one reason why you're hyper independent in your life and you're a go getter and you're an overachiever and then you're a codependent mess and you tend to attract people you want to caretake is because of fear, subconscious fear based beliefs of I'm not worthy, I'm unlovable, something's wrong with me, I'm not good enough that cause you to want to work harder and you believe that you need to work harder to feel successful or to feel worthy, let me prove my worth by achieving more and doing more and being more successful. But at the end of the day, it's like a bottomless pit. I had a client one time tell me it was like she felt like she was a hamster on the wheel, but eventually she just like pooped out and was laying at the bottom of the hamster wheel, lifeless while the wheel kept turning. So it becomes a vicious cycle where no matter how hard you work on making the relationship viable or how hard you work on healing yourself or how hard you work in your career, it never seems to be enough. And the reason behind that is because you haven't healed that trauma and you haven't shifted those subconscious beliefs yet. And when you have those subconscious beliefs, a lot of times there's a neighboring fear of emotional intimacy. You are terrified of actually having a healthy relationship. I talk to many, many, many women who tell me they're afraid of repeating the pattern because they've done it so long that it keeps happening. And really, when we get underneath that, they're not actually afraid of repeating the pattern. They're actually really good at repeating the pattern. The real fear is that they're afraid of letting somebody all the way into their heart. That's terrifying because that's the unknown. She's never experienced that before. And somewhere in her psychology, there's a belief that if I do that, I'm going to lose myself even more. What if this person abandons me? What if this person rejects me? There's more at risk. The emotional stakes are higher when you are truly emotionally intimate with somebody. And you can't truly be emotionally intimate with somebody until you're emotionally intimate with yourself. And a lot of women are not that. They deal with their trauma, they deal with their feelings of unworthiness by doing more for other people. They work harder in their jobs, they stay chronically busy. They feel like a martyr around their family, their friends, and their coworkers. They people please their way through conflict and they grow resentment. And when you're feeling resentment in your relationships, there's no room for emotional intimacy. So, a lot of women, if you have this pattern, you're subconsciously going to create distance in your relationships by subconsciously choosing unavailable or narcissistic partners. Or if you do get a healthy partner for a minute, you're going to find some way to pick that person apart because subconsciously that feels terrifying. And the longer you do this, unfortunately, the more people believe that it's not possible for them, or they get more jaded, they get more bristly, they get more hardened, they get more mistrustful. It's not that love isn't possible for you. It's not that good men aren't out there. I hear this a lot. There's no good men my age. Have you seen the men my age? They all look terrible. That's, pardon my French, bullshit. The number one thing that stops you from having a healthy relationship is yourself and all of the resistance that you tend to put up because of unhealed trauma, because of fear, because of abandonment issues. And until you get uncomfortable for a little while and properly heal that trauma, and then make choices every day that are out of your comfort zone that are going to challenge you to be emotionally intimate and vulnerable, the cycle doesn't change. And unfortunately, I've talked to many, many hundreds of women at this point who have children and their children are now repeating the pattern. They watch their teenagers, they watch their 20 something year olds getting married or struggling to have healthy relationships because that's what they've witnessed. And a lot of the time, 80 to 90% of the time, that's what the women I talk to have witnessed. So they grew up in that pattern. They get into their adult lives, they have children, and then they repeat that generational pattern. So here's what I want to say. It's not impossible to break. It is only impossible to break if you believe that. It's possible, but you have to be 1000% committed to moving into the unknown and to believing in a reality that you haven't yet experienced. You have to be 1000% committed to believing in a dream that hasn't yet come to fruition yet for you. And until you are committed to that, nothing will really change. I talk to people on breakthrough sessions, and we get to a question where, why is this an absolute must for you to heal your trauma and open your heart to a healthy relationship for the rest of your life? Maybe you're not ready for that now, but eventually when you're ready, why is it an absolute must for you to do this? Some of the times, it's really hard for people to answer that question because they've gotten so used to justifying staying stuck and living and settling and staying in a small, kind of stagnant life and not getting their needs met that they become okay with that. And, it's not good, bad, or wrong. But if you're okay with kind of being where you are, understand that not a lot will really change. Most people don't change until things get really bad. This is kind of the human condition. Most people don't change unless they've had enough pain. If they've reached the threshold of I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, I know something has to change. So, what needs to happen in order to stop the fear based pattern that's causing you to be hyper independent, overachieving in your normal life, and then codependent in your relationships and never getting your needs met? You have to heal that fear. You have to heal your trauma. And you have to use evidence based methods to do that. Research shows talking about your past in the rearview mirror and analyzing it and wanting to know why it happened is like 10% good. You get some stuff from that. But unfortunately, what research shows is that most people who do that go out and repeat the same patterns in their lives. They don't change. They get a highlight reel, they get some information. But when it comes to the trauma patterns that play out in the relationships, talk therapy and analyzing it in the past has been shown in research to just reinforce the patterns in your brain and in your body. So you have to be using something that's going to break that pattern. We use somatic therapy here, which is a mind body based therapy to dial down your negative, crazy thinking monkey mind and then dial down your nervous system. If you're living in anxiety every day, if you're constantly obsessing about your ex or ruminating about your ex or worrying about the future, like what could go wrong, you're living in a state of fight or flight. And so somatic therapy is designed to neutralize that and bring you back into a state of balance emotionally, emotional freedom, feeling more at ease every single day, feeling more confident in who you are, feeling more anchored in in your sense of self and your sense of identity. And then from there, it's a whole lot easier to begin shifting your subconscious beliefs about what you're capable of. I'm unlovable. I'm not worthy, whatever. Your body and your brain need to be relaxed a good chunk of the time in order for you to effectively begin shifting those subconscious beliefs and that programming, and then making choices that are out of your comfort zone every single day to stretch that comfort zone to help you show up in relationship settings with more vulnerability, with clear communication, with setting boundaries, without wanting the other person to change so you can feel better, radical acceptance. So, these are the things that need to happen consistently. Most people don't see change in their life because they're not consistent. That's the number one thing. If you talk to athletes, if you talk to people that want to lose weight and go to the gym, if you talk to people that want to build wealth and generational wealth and millions of dollars, if you talk to people who want to build a business, the number one reason that stops people from their goals is consistency, lack of consistency. And then the second thing is falling back into their old patterns because it's comfortable and it's what we know. Our brains are designed to like the comfort zone, it's a survival mechanism. Our brains are also designed to memorize negative patterns 8 times stronger than positive ones, also a survival mechanism. So, you're kind of working with biological states and programming that are kind of working against you. So you have to be truly committed to that process. So if you recognize, hey, this is me, I keep doing this, I've been doing this 30, 40, 50, 60 years of my life. I'm done with this. I know that I can't keep draining myself in the wrong relationships. I know I can't keep draining myself probably in my job. And I need to make some serious shifts. Book a call and we'll see if we can help you overcome that trauma, overcome your fears, overcome your self doubt, your insecurities, your confidence issues, and help you get into a state that makes you an emotional match for a healthy relationship and helps remove your fears, your subconscious fears of emotional intimacy, and helps you actually become your own inner best friend, build the strongest relationship that you've ever had with yourself so that you can attract the strongest relationship that you've ever had in your adult life. So, quick note about who the call is for. So you're single, you're not hoping to work it out with a narcissistic partner or an unavailable partner. I recognize these relationships are highly addictive. You're past the point of wanting to work it out with somebody. You recognize you may still think about that person. That person may still take up a lot of space in your mind and in your heart, but you're like, okay, I realize this is really toxic and unhealthy for me and it's keeping me stuck. So you're single and you're 100% done. Second thing that we ask is that you're established in your life. I was speaking with somebody recently who was on the run and basically didn't have a location. She was homeless, living with friends, and unemployed, and running from a domestic violence situation. We want you to be stable. So you're successful in other areas of your life. Your home life is stable. Your career, your job life is stable. There might be some toxicity there, but overall, the rest of your life is stable and you're successful in other areas of life. And this is just because complex trauma, which is usually the root of these relationship patterns, is best healed with other areas of your life are generally going well. So those are the two criteria that we ask people to meet in order to book a call. So if that's you, go to bethanydotson.com/talk. We'll have an honest conversation. We'll see if we can help you get past your blocks and have a breakthrough on that call. And if we feel like we can help you, we'll show you what that looks like. And if not, we will steer you in the direction that is best for you, given the point in the journey that you are on. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Take care, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. A brand new episode drops each week. Be sure to click and subscribe. And remember, healing trauma, codependency, and your lifelong pattern in love does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance and evidence-based methods. And I have helped hundreds of incredible women from all over the country heal betrayal trauma and reclaim their confidence while falling wildly in love with their own lives and attracting healthy relationships. If you like what you heard today and you want to see if you're fit to work with us, go to bethanydotson.com/talk. That's bethanydotson.com/talk and book a call to speak with us today. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes and get you crystal clear on 3 things. The real reason you keep attracting dysfunctional relationships, even if you know better or even if you've done tons of work on yourself. What you really want in a relationship, how you want to feel emotionally every single day in your life, and what lifestyle changes you want to make. And then number 3, the exact strategy you need to be using to get there. Again, healing trust issues, codependency, and a lifelong pattern does not happen without expert guidance. We've helped hundreds of women across the country heal complex trauma, codependency, and have the healthiest relationships ever, both with themselves and with others. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk to book your call today. I'll see you on the next episode.